The air was heavy with electricity. Curled up in your box beneath an overpass bridge, you stared at the running feet. The only reason your box wasn't kicked in was due to it being shoved into a tiny nook. Someone would have to go out of their way to harm it, or you, as a matter of fact. The clock atop Heaven's embassy had rung, bringing in the next extermination. And you had nowhere to go, pathetic as you were. You were a sinner in life, as such as you had been appropriately punished. To be a demon of utter patheticness. You had no powers, no flight, no throwing fireballs, no massive boost in strength. If anything, you still look completely human. Minus a very long and thin tail with a heart-shaped scale at its tip. You had long, bushy black hair, pale-looking skin, and you looked quite frail. But at least not emaciated. With no powers and no real goal in mind, you had just curled up somewhere hoping the misery would end someday. And it seemed like tonight was the night. Once the rush of fleeing demons had subsided, you crawled out from underneath your box. Angels would soon descend to cull the ever-increasing amount of demons in hell. But even though your brain desired to turn left to go where the explosions and strange static crackling were coming from, your feet disobeyed. And you walked to the right instead. Not really understanding why. Probably some innate survival instinct of yours. Your steps starting slow, but then they picked up speed. And without really understanding it, you are now in a full-on sprint. Running from the angels. Running for your life. Truly, it was a strange experience. You had been raised Catholic. Somewhere in the deep recesses of your mind, you still thought angels were merciful, good beings. Running from them, being targeted by them, felt so wrong. You didn't even feel like you deserved to be down here. Sure, once or twice you had stolen a little bit of money from your mom's wallet to buy ice cream, but you had been a teenager. What teen doesn't do that? You lived a boring life. Nothing special. Had you been too mischievous? You did stab a coworker or two in the back once, getting them fired instead of you, though again, this felt a little much. What else bad did you do in life, you thought, as you were dodging into an alleyway to catch your breath? You over-relied on others. Yes, that was something even your therapist pointed out. A bad habit of yours. You over-relied on others while having no emotional attachment to them, making it easy to make people work for you while you still got credit. Yeah, maybe that's why hell made you this pathetic little thing. Your sin in life was now your reality. No more convenience, now you were forced. You heard an evil chuckle come from an alley entrance. Thinking quickly, you dived under a nearby dumpster. Well, being so little didn't seem so bad now, did it? I've seen your little morsel, taunted the angel happily, her feet stopping next to the dumpster. Your little pitter-patter brought me right to you. The angel grabbed the lid of the garbage container and, as she threw it open, she raised her eyebrow. In there was a demon, sure, but not the one she had been after. Ah, well, demon was demon. She shrugged. At least she still got to kill something. What mattered if one got away? This one would do nicely. You heard the heavy metal of the angel's spear shoot through the container, the white blade bursting through the underside of the container. So close, it just barely managed to make just a tiny cut at the tip of your nose. You immediately pressed your hands on your mouth. It hurt so much. More than this little wound should. It was like you were getting tased, stabbed, and shot at the same time. All located on your face. Tears uncontrollably streaming out of your eyes as you try to stay as quiet as possible. Through your tearful gaze, you watch the feet of the angel disappear. That had been so unbelievably painful as it was unbelievably lucky. However, just as you try to crawl out of your hiding spot, something wrapped around your right ankle. You screamed into your hands as you desperately tried to crawl away. But the pull was disgustingly powerful, and so as your survival instinct kicked in once again, you bit your lower lip, almost drawing blood, grabbed onto the ground with both hands, and pushed yourself forward. Whatever had gotten you let go after a few seconds. What the hell was that? It wasn't an angel, you thought, as you crawled out of the dumpster. You rushed back onto the street. There were two angels at the other end, pulling demons out of crashed cars to end their miserable existence, cackling as they did so. There was no way of telling, however, what was happening the way that you had come from. And so you sighed, taking a chance. They were distracted after all. You took a deep breath before charging forward. Luckily, you somehow managed to avoid the angel's gaze. For righteous beings of light that saw sin anywhere they looked, they felt a little blind. Well, maybe just hyper-focused on exterminating the people that were in front of them, rather than around them. But that was good. For you. You exhaled, heart pounding. The stress was getting to you. In fact, it was getting to you so much that you didn't even notice the rogue shadow sneaking up on you. Though just as it was about to grab you, you continued on your way, causing the demon who had been hunting you the entire evening to almost swear. But he'd have you yet. You were a precious little morsel, and a challenging one to catch at that as well. He simply must have your soul. He simply could not resist. He didn't even know where this came from. Usually he wasn't this interested in morsels. Ugh, and the fact that you weren't even noticing his presence, that you had been dodging his attempts all night, that just made him more ferocious, more angry, but also more happy. This was so much fun. And finally, he saw a true opportunity. You had been slipping under the corpse of a really big demon. Problem was that the thing was still alive, audibly breathing, as he held onto his wounds. The angel who had caused this simply only had been distracted by one of the hunter's shadow puppets. Carefully, the hunter positioned himself, readying his dark tentacles. And just as the angel returned to continue in killing the demon, just as the tip of the spear barely brushed against your skin after being pushed through the demon, he snapped his fingers. His tentacles quickly, like snakes, wrapping around your wrists and ankles in less than a second. You were pulled into darkness. The angel only noticing a slight pulse beneath the demon, which made her eyes narrow suspiciously. But there was no time to investigate. There was killing to be done. Meanwhile, you were spit butt first out of the dark puddle, onto the roof of a tall tower. You rubbed your miserable behind with a sad hum. At the end of the roof, overlooking the city, stood a man, dressed in red, staring down at the happenings below. As you tried to stand, however, his head turned to face you, eyes glowing red with malice, and he approached you with a malevolent smile.
Well, well, well. Good evening, little lady,
he mused. His voice was all statically, like he was talking through an old radio.
Alastor, quite the pleasure meeting someone of your caliber.
He held out his hand for you to take, and with a shaking hand you accepted the gesture as he helped you up. "Where am I?" you asked, afraid.
You are atop one of the many fabulous buildings of the city, right in the middle of the dead zone. Beautiful carnage all around us. It's thanks to my shield they can't see us.
You then noticed a barely visible distortion around the rooftop. So this demon was camouflaging the both of you. Okay. Thank you. My name is Mud, by the way.
Mud?
He asked, tilting his head curiously. That's what everyone just started calling me. Alastor crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. You acted so stereotypical for the demon that you were. Though, if he was in your shoes and knew what you were capable of, Mud was not the name he'd choose.
There's great importance to a proper name, my dear, and,
He stopped himself mid-sentence, realizing he almost fell for your kind's trap. You were a faceling, a devious little demon creature, a parasite. Your entire race, luckily exceedingly rare, had the ability of charity and care. With how human your kind looked, with how weak and pathetic you were physically, faceling demons immediately awoke anyone's protective instincts. Hellborn demons were especially susceptible to this ability, often causing mother demons to abandon their own children just to care for a faceling instead. Any demon overlord, such as Alastor, knew to not trust your kind, and to especially never make any of you aware of your ability. It was good you considered your name to be Mud, as that was quite dehumanizing. Whoever gave you that name either knew what you were, or truly didn't care about you. As anything that humanized you was like a hook digging into someone's brain. He needed to treat you like absolute dirt to avoid the spell from hitting him. There was just a little problem. That Alastor didn't realize right now was the fact that he had risked his afterlife chasing after you, trying to grab you, as, indeed, the radio demon already was under your spell. As a matter of fact, you had once polished his shoes, exactly 3 weeks ago, and ever since then he had been but a rock throw away from you, even when he didn't realize it. Though he thought he just wanted to devour you, but in reality, the feeling that he had, that was growing by the second, and why he couldn't hold himself back anymore, why he just had to talk to you now, wasn't hunger or murderous intent. And right now, he was merely mistaking it for really, really wanting your soul, but in reality, what he felt right now was an obsessive love, a feeling he thought he was never going to be capable of.
Well, well, Mud, you are a lucky one indeed. See, darling, I'm a very powerful overlord. I could grant you protection from all these evils in hell, but in return, darling, I would like you to serve me.
You looked at the ground, your tail swishing around anxiously. Salvia was dripping down Alastor's mouth as he spoke. He wanted to see you as something more. He knew the second he took any pity on you, it was over for him. But he already felt it. Right now, you could throw anything into the mix. An additional clause, a demand, and he would agree. And still think he got the better deal. Uncomfortably, you shifted. Not sure what Alastor wanted from you. Is this a sex thing? You asked cautiously, knowing how lecherous demons could be. Alastor's grin widened, but he didn't answer, though for a reason unknown to him, even someone as ace as him, this mere suggestion did a lot to him. Curious. A sudden explosion from below made you jump. Heavy black smoke was coming from the streets beneath the building. Fine, just please keep me safe. You can do whatever you want with me. As right eye twitched. Outright hearing you say that, frightened as you were, made him realize that he had already lost. And he was upset, though he was unable to show it. You little devil, you. He'd need to make sure that you were on a tight leash. With a smug smile, Alastor held out his hand for you to shake. Closing your eyes, you took it. Your entire body shook, as if every muscle in your body at once was cramping up. It was incredibly painful, comparable to the angel's spear. Was this how it felt to have your soul taken for protection? Either way, it wasn't pleasant. But as the feeling subsided, Alastor was still holding you. A slightly softer expression in his eyes. Curious, he wondered. A quite pleasant feeling had enveloped him as your skin touched. So this was it. The power of a faceling. He couldn't hold himself back anymore. His tongue lolled out of his mouth, and then he pushed you up against the door that led to the rooftop stairwell. You exhaled, a bit of sweat running down your anxious forehead.
You know, little mud, your soul is quite delicious.
You gulped as you looked up into his face. What are you doing?
Protecting you.
He whispered into your ear.
While also doing what you told me to do as I please.
Alastor had never felt like this before. This feeling, it made him desire your flesh, but not in the literal sense. No, he wanted you. He wanted to touch you, feel you, but not devour you. Well, maybe take a bite. He was offended at the realization that you had charmed him. And yet he wanted nothing more than to kiss you. An action he usually found quite disgusting, and yet he hesitated. Even you could tell. He was holding himself back. How he hated this! And yet his body screamed at him to get your consent. You meanwhile sighed, thinking being his chew toy was better than being torn to shreds by angels. And so you surrendered yourself to him, allowed him to kiss you. Alastor understood that despite everything, despite the rarity of facelings in hell, despite the fact that you were special, the fact he so easily was taken over by you without even realizing it at first, made you not something he could brag about with. Annoyed, his lips pressed against yours, and you could feel his hot tongue prod against your closed lips. Alastor was a hungry kisser, it seemed, as well as a little clumsy. It was obvious that he didn't kiss often, but you could tell by his dominating presence that He at least knew what he wanted and how to get it. Finally, you allowed his tongue passage. And almost immediately it wrapped around yours, like a slick, slimy tentacle enveloping your tongue. It wiggled, jerking around yours, making your mouth his. Your toes curled at the pleasure Alastor was giving you. Though as you were moaning, groaning, and shuddering in pure bliss, he was filled with a feeling of absolute hatred. He felt as if you won. And even as he pushed you down to dominate you further, as he tore away the rags you were wearing, rubbing his thick claws over your tiny, weak, miserable body, as they scratched painfully over your chest, making you bite your lower lip in pain, as he was ravaging your tiny body, he couldn't help but lament the fact that even after all this, you still had won. You had gotten to his darkened heart. Sure, he had your soul, but what use did it have if he couldn't use it, if he didn't have the heart to just tear it to shreds at any moment? Shivering, unclothed, you lied next to him. You were completely out of breath, and you were bleeding a little everywhere. He really bit a lot and scratched a lot. In the meantime, he was putting his clothes back on.
Darling, I had a wonderful idea while I was inside you.
He mused. Huh? You felt weak.
There's this absolutely darling little hotel I'm considering to invest my time and effort into. I believe you would be perfect there.
Your mere presence would cause unimaginable chaos. And besides, should this redemption nonsense really work in the end, once you were in heaven, you'd be out of his mind. A win-win.
Just.
A shadowy tentacle wrapped around your throat in a pleasurable manner as it lightly choked you.
Remember who you belong to, Mud, darling.
Thank you for watching my video until the very end. But before we say goodbye, I would like to thank all of my lovely darling stewards and butlers. Angel, Zachary, Nicodemus D, Ash Wisdom, and AJ Anime Girl. Lastly, I would also like to say thank you to all my lovely darling mates. You are keeping me alive and happy. Thank you for being members.